Robert Abraham Morss. I left home at 17 to become an airborne ranger, deployed to Afghanistan 3 times, but on my first deployment to Afghanistan, I decided that I would make more of an impact as a high school history teacher than a soldier. And I recognized that the wasteland that I was walking through would follow me home if the next generation didn't keep this republic. So I decided to dedicate my entire adult life to becoming a high school history teacher. Went to Penn State to make that happen. So moved to Pennsylvania in 2016, got my degree from Penn State, and then 2 weeks after that, I was at the Capitol. So I ended up spending 3.5 years in prison as a January 6th political prisoner. During that time, fell in love with Christ more than I ever had in my entire life. And I am now laser focused on not just returning to the classroom to teach real history and to teach kids how to fall in love with their nation, but I'm interested in rescuing Western civilization. I'm interested in making sure that I can keep this republic myself, not just the kids in my classroom who I encourage to do so. I must keep this with my example, whom the example that I follow is Christ's. So it all blends together really well in that regard. I would say that, yes, you can pick up the book, One Question Remains. It was written in prison, smuggled out of prison, and is available now on Amazon to try to expose how January 6th was a lobster trap. But there's a lot more irons in the fire for me. I'm excited to get back to teaching school, but I'm also excited about Project Carpe Diem that's in the works. So there's a lot going on, and I've never been more motivated to save the sinking ship of this nation. And I know that I won't do it alone. So I'm excited about doing it with fellow Pennsylvanians, fellow patriotic Americans all across this land. You know, like Hank Williams Jr. says, we're all over the place. We know how to survive, and we will.
Talk about Pennsylvania having a special place in your heart because of where you were teaching when you were arrested.
Sure. So Pennsylvania, historically speaking, has played an inseparable role within our nation's history. We wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War without Pennsylvania and Virginia donating the most lives into the war effort. Those 2 states not only funded the war, but they also bled for the war more than any other colony or state at the time. So Pennsylvania is crucial to the independence of this nation. Furthermore, time and time again, Pennsylvania just seems to be the eye of the storm with a lot of events. I mean, think about what just happened in Butler. You know, I mean, a little town in Pennsylvania that no one's ever heard of before now just became one of the epicenters and one of the craziest political campaigns that this country's ever known or seen. So Pennsylvania, for whatever reasons, got something on this land, you know, to be important. So, for example, we wouldn't have won World War II without it. Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh specifically, was the reason why we won World War II. So much Pittsburgh steel was coming out of this state that the Axis powers actually had plans to destroy Pittsburgh from afar because of how profound we were making the war effort a possibility of winning because of Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is incredible. I love this town. I love this state. And the way that it's contributed to American history was something that I wanted to honor as I was teaching American history. I never knew that I was going to be a part of history by being a history teacher, but here we are. So when I got arrested on June 11th, 2021, I was actually on my way to the last day of school of the school year that I was humbled and honored to teach. I'm actually wearing the same tie that I wore the day of my arrest. So it's a sad state of affairs, but honestly, it was actually kind of a beautiful thing. Because of my arrest in this great state, I've become a better man. I've fallen more in love with Christ. And the impact that I've had on the students is something that I actually cherish. They're never going to forget me for one of 2 reasons. One, because how often does your teacher get arrested for being involved in the lobster trap that January 6th was? But it was also really cool because close to that last day of school, I had students entering the classroom saying that we learned more in the 6 months of taking your courses than we had without the entire 4 years of high school combined. So the impact that I've had on the kids is something that motivates me. I connect with the kids. They know that they're safe in my classroom, and they also know that they're learning real history that a teacher is passionate about, not just a textbook or a computer or a TV screen reciting something that you'll ignore later on in life and not even recall when you need it. But I wanted to teach history about how in this state, George Washington accidentally started the first real World War. And he kick-started the 7 Years' War, which had campaigns all across the planet. So technically, the first World War happened long before we had even invented the locomotive. That happened here in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of amazing things to teach. And referencing George Washington, the kids really absorbed the concept that the father of a nation started out by being a military failure. But because of his persistence, because of his faith in God, and because of his desire to honor those who believed in him, he didn't give up. And he ended up designing a country where we have an idea of what freedom is. I don't know that these days we can truly say that we're free. A lot of people have been trying to ruin this country for a long time. But I think now is the day where people unanimously have decided, from the coast of Oregon to the tip of Florida or Maine even, that we're not going to let this country go without a fight. That's what January 6th was all about. We know that they stole the election, and those are unforgivable sins that we're not going to let anybody get away with anymore in this country. So it's cool to be a part of that rising tide of American patriotism. I've said it before that I think this must have been what people felt like in World War II, when you look to your left and you look to your right and every American is fighting side by side to accomplish something. Back then it was to defeat the Axis powers and make sure that our boys come home. Well, now it's to liberate this nation from domestic tyranny. Way back when this nation kicked off, it was to liberate ourselves from foreign tyranny. But a lot of people also don't realize that before we were capable of declaring independence from Britain, we also had to be capable of declaring independence from sin. And so prior to the Revolution, there was a Reformation movement amongst the colonies. And a lot of our founding fathers recite that they're so proud to see these colonies cooperating and the courts are empty and things of that nature. And they're convinced that the revolution will be successful because men and women wanted it. They didn't just talk about it, they wanted it, but they felt that they could perform it because they knew that the God of heaven was on their side. And I think that's what's happening today. We're in a 250-year-old time loop. It's an honor to be alive right now, because everything that we do from here on out has the timeless significance of the ages, and that's purpose.
So it's amazing how we met and how we became such fast friends. Finding the more people that I meet like you, of course we've already talked about this, but election integrity, people that were willing to stand up and say the 2020 election was stolen, how intertwined we are now with the J6 community, just whether it's emotionally, I just feel like our heartstrings are attached because people like me were fighting for people like you without realizing that's what we were doing.
And vice versa. I think, my story as a January 6er started long before I was ever incarcerated. We love this country. We want our kids to love this country and know what freedom means, so I remember actually meeting somebody who I'd end up going to prison with at the Harrisburg rally, at the Stop the Steal rally, right after the election was stolen. So I'm Sam Lazar. He was, I think he's near Lancaster or something like that. But I'd been following him and his sister. They were doing all these videos.
Oh, I know
on
exactly
Facebook.
Who that is. Actually, his sister. I think I know his sister.
Yeah, and they're great people. And I was following them for a while because they were putting out content about, what the government's doing and all this. And so I meet him at the Harrisburg rally. I'm like, hey, dude, I've seen you on Facebook, and he's got the megaphone. He's out there. He's doing his thing. And then I get locked up, and I'd see him in Northern Neck Regional Jail for January 6th. I'm like, wait a second. Were you at January 6th too? And he goes, yeah, were you? Yeah. So there's been so many people, regardless of what skin color you have or what family you come from or whatever, that saw garbage and were like, nah, we're not playing that game here.
Yep.
You've played a lot of games in the past. Okay, cool, whatever. But this is something we're not playing games with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm anxious, and anxious isn't a good word. I'm excited to start a series of interviews. You're the second one I've sat down with in person. Sarah McAbee was the first. Cool. To try to, I just feel very led to get these stories out. One of my biggest disappointments, and I don't know that I'll ever understand it, is I thought after I was at the inauguration, I was blessed to get an invitation to actually attend and get to do, I'm not a big red carpet person. I don't really like getting all dolled up and doing that stuff. I'm usually my hair's on the top of my head in a ponytail. I don't have any makeup on. This takes too much time.
You're a fighter though.
Yeah. But I was blessed, and it was really cool. I told my husband, I said, is it bad that I feel like I'm more excited about this than I was our wedding day. He's like, nope, I feel the same way. So we had a great time while we were down there. And I remember at the dinner getting the word that it happened, you know, because he got inaugurated and everybody was, is he going to do the pardon? He better do the pardon. They were waiting like all day.
A lot of people were talking about it.
Yeah, it was, so at dinner, there was actually a couple that was at the dinner that I went to, one of the inaugural balls, whose son was a January 6er that was getting pardoned. Wow. And they, you know, I just remember everybody saying thank you, and they were leaving. They left the dinner like before anything started because they were so excited.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I seriously thought that would dominate the airwaves for weeks, that the good guys would get paraded around all the biggest podcasts and social media, and we would get these stories like yours out, so that this never happens again. To me, this is a part of defending the republic and preserving liberty, is making sure people understand the truth, because unfortunately there's still a lot I come across on a daily basis that don't. And so I'm really honored as you are to be here. I'm as honored that you would be willing to chat with us and get
without a doubt, thank you,
a little more of your story out. I know we had a podcast the other night on the Audit the Vote socials, and Rumble and YouTube, but I wanted to dive a little deeper and get
yeah, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Get a little deeper into what this is all about. And it was great meeting you at CPAC. But you seem very nostalgic, as am I.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Big nostalgia. So tell me about what you're wearing and the significance of.
Sure. So I'm actually wearing the same tie that I was wearing the day of my arrest, which I can actually I'll show you what it looks like. You can't really see it much, but.
Oh my gosh.
There it is.
Oh my gosh. Feather pen.
Yeah. That's the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, everything. And so this was the tie that I was extremely excited about. You know, to wear on the last day of school, so my students would not only see my pride in them, but the unanimous pride that we should have in our country. And I remember the FBI handling this thing.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's kind of sad, but you know, they decided to take my Legos instead, not my tie.
It's just crazy, the narrative that they painted around. For those that don't know, I'm the Lego Man. I'm sitting here with Robert Morss, a.k.a. the Lego Man.
That's right. Yeah.
And I had never heard your story either until we met a few weeks back at CPAC. And it's amazing that they tried to pin you as the mastermind behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because you liked Legos and you had a Lego set of the Capitol.
That's right.
That wasn't even built.
That's right. And so then they try to say that I'm the architect of the insurrection. It's in my court documents. Somehow is like supporting evidence to trump up my charges. Yeah, so it was just nuts.
In your trial, did they bring that out, that you had the Lego set? Did they talk about that?
By that time, my trial didn't even happen until almost 2 years into my incarceration.
Wow.
That's how sinister this whole thing became. But by that time, the narrative had become so comedic that I don't think they wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole. When they did bring it up, according to Miranda Devine's work, she talks about the blockheads at the FBI bringing forth this damning evidence of this Lego set, and the judge is so unimpressed. He says, "Get this out of my courtroom. How did he do this if the Legos are still in the box?" So
wow.
But at that point in time, it was too late. You know, people had known about it, and now it's like this silly moniker, which I thought was kind of funny. But by the time I went to trial and get smoked in the kangaroo court that it was in Trevor McFadden's courtroom, they didn't want to talk about the Legos, because that's another piece of the pie of how much they're willing to lie and distort the truth to bury me along with the secret that they did in fact steal the election, as you know full well. And they wanted to stage an event like January 6th to tie in the history that they were trying to write, regardless of how false it was.
That's a really good way to say it. So it sounds like you had a judge that seemed somewhat unbiased and sane and looked at it and said, this is nonsense.
Well, the first judge that I had in the beginning wasn't the judge that I went to trial with.
Okay.
So the first judge, and I forget his name actually at this point, but he was willing to throw that out. Who knows if this Judge McFadden, was willing to do that had that been presented to him. But I will say this, at my sentencing, he talked about how I was the most dangerous person there that day. Oh yeah, even though.
How many prisons does he own?
Good question. Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm going down to Northern Neck Regional Jail after this, and I'm going to talk about how the judge owns that jail and the people that he's sentencing to go to that jail. He actually gets a kickback from. So it's a whole
Most people have
racketeering
no
scheme within
idea.
yeah, it's all corrupt within this government. But when it comes to my sentencing, McFadden, here's my sentencing speech, which is available on my website, www.akalegoman.com with 2 G's, because I'm not trying to get sued.
That's why there's 2 G's.
Yes.
I was going to ask you that. Smart.
Well, you got to be now, you know. You dance with the devil, you learn a couple moves, you know. So, but I give him my sentencing speech, and he looks at me and he says, you know, Robert Morss, what happened that day? And it's almost like we're having a conversation like you and I are. And I tell him that I was leaving that day. I was cold. I was tired. I was hungry. I had a job interview the very next day. I was going to work as a personal trainer at Anytime Fitness.
Wow.
The very next day, I was supposed to show up for, you know, the job interview. And I told him that I was leaving until I watched the police shoot flashbangs into the largest pro-Trump crowd of Asians who had fled communist China personally and were passing out in the CCP flyers at January 6th. The police fired flashbangs into that crowd so that the grenades would erupt by the faces of their women and children. And that's when I ran in. And I told them that, you know, I didn't dress for war. I dressed to show that I've already invested sweat and blood equity into this country. That's why I wore my uniform. That's why I wore the colors that I deployed to Afghanistan 3 times in, to show you how much I love this place, not because I'm trying to ruin it or usurp it. The wrong crowd that you've got locked up, you know, they're suffering a fate that other people did. And I hope that we find the insurrectionists, the real insurrectionists, and I know a couple of their names within these next 4 years. But after hearing all that, he stands up abruptly, leaves the courtroom, and then after 7 minutes, he comes back in and he gives me less time than he was bragging about giving me earlier. He was talking about maybe I need to go away for 90 plus months, but then he changed his mind to 66. So I think he went behind the curtain and told the demon that was telling him to crush me, and he said, I can't give the time to this man that you want me to. And so the compromise that he made with whoever's puppeteering him was 66 months instead of 90, as he was bragging about in the beginning of the day.
Wow.
This goes way deeper than just a couple of good old boys from Pennsylvania getting rounded up at the Capitol because they're too patriotic, which doesn't exist. This is about actual individuals who have been spending their entire life's work at bringing down this nation within every institution that we think is, you know, focused on the best of intentions for this nation, whether it's the Department of Education or it's the justice system. These people that want to destroy this country and hate everything that we used to stand for are very close and are still very close to bringing this nation down. And it's crazy that Donald Trump has become president literally each time that we've been at that brink, the point of no return. Both times.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because most people in 2016, I shouldn't say most, a lot of people in 2016 were not awake yet.
No.
Me being one of them.
Sure.
So didn't know the brink that we were about to fall off the cliff.
Yep.
And then,
How
of
crazy
course,
is that?
seeing the cliff, and one of the, you probably feel the same way. One of the hardest pills for me to swallow now is to be thankful for the 2020 steal, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Because as painful as those 4 years were, my work didn't even start until after they inaugurated Joe Biden.
I didn't even look at the TV when that was happening. This was after January 6th. I was in the gym and they're playing the inauguration and I turned my back to that garbage. I was like, you're not real.
I didn't
watch
watch it. President. I couldn't. I could not watch it.
You didn't earn that.
Right? And there were multiple court cases that were still alive that I believe if they would have gone forth, our Supreme Court, for whatever reason, cowered it out and wouldn't take any of the evidence.
You want to know why they did? And you want to know why the Epstein list hasn't been released yet?
I would love to know that.
Because Supreme Court judges are on that list. That's why. That's why. That's
just
if they
one.
Release, I don't know if it's limited to one, but I can guarantee you that the names that are on that list, when they drop, it's going to be so devastating that people aren't even going to show up to work. People aren't even going to want to, obey societal norms and laws and stuff like that, because the people that we know are on it, like the Clintons,
right?
Okay, cool.
Bill Clinton's been there 26 times. We know that.
It's like, okay, we expect that. That's not going to be a shock. The reason why that list hasn't been dropped is because the people that we thought were blameless or that we could trust, they're going to be on it.
Do you think there's a lot of scuttlebutt right now about it not being out because Kash Patel, director of the FBI now, has touted forever that day one, if he got in any position of power, day one that list was going to come out, and it's still not out yet. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he is weighing his options because I think he wants to do the right thing, but he's also aware that it's essentially going to be like proving that aliens are 100% real. I'm serious. It's going to be that devastating to society as we know it today.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he's afraid. Someone who's going to be talking about his plans and stuff like that publicly about how he's going to tear to shreds the FBI as it is doesn't sound like someone who's got a lot of fear. You know, I feel like if you were afraid, you'd want to pretend like you're Lindsey Graham or Mitch McConnell, you know, and play both sides because of how much of a coward they are, you know. But I think once he finally got in that office, people that we may never know the name of approach him and like, listen, dude, this is how big of a deal it is. We know you want to do this, but are you willing to lose all that for a little bit of honor?
Got it.
And I think Trump might have been approached by similar people with a similar decision, you know. And I think maybe Amy Coney Barrett was approached with a similar decision, and that's why she looked at Trump with such blood in her eye after that latest address. You know, like there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And if you pay attention to some of the video footage, you can see the look in people's eyes, whether they're focused or something's changed or someone had a conversation recently, and we're hip to it now, you know.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people didn't wake up. I think one of the biggest red pill moments for this nation was the pandemic. A lot of people.
Oh, that's what did it for me.
Yeah,
100%.
a lot of people were like, wait
Instantly.
a second, what?
Yes, that was my instant reaction, like, huh?
Yep. And I think, you know, kind of bringing it back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, you were surprised that there wasn't like this big parade or celebration about January 6th. I think that so many Americans, God bless them, have been convinced that fear and going along the assembly line of life is their only option. And to a degree, it's true. You know, like if you were to go down the assembly line of life and you're willing to just pay your taxes and just do your job and just raise a family the way that you think you're supposed to, yeah, it will be a nice life for you. But like in Braveheart, when William Wallace says, wouldn't you want to come back here just for one chance to tell our enemies that you can take our lives, but you'll never take our freedom? So there's so many people right now that are passing up their God-given destiny for a little bit of comfort that they can't even stand themselves, because as they open up that beer and kick back that lazy boy to watch whatever football game they're watching, they're wishing deep down that they were actually in the TV playing that game. But that's where you and I are.
I know.
And so once people are sucked into the hero's journey, as I think you and I were, there's no going back. And I think people are afraid of that because, for what it's worth, the devil that they know is better than the devil that they don't.
I'll say.
And so there's a lot of fear around your destiny.
Yep.
But that's, again, why our God calls us to be strong and courageous. And he doesn't say, hey, man, have you thought about it? He says, no, I've commanded you to be strong and courageous.
When I speak, I talk about that I knew I got saved and was a Christian in my early 20s. And I lived what I thought was the good little Christian life. I went to church, raised my kids, but I paid no attention to what was going on in the world around me. And I thought, I knew evil, like we're taught, you know, that Satan is the prince of this world. We know that this isn't our ultimate home. And so I knew evil existed, but I thought it's hiding in the dark corners of the world. I had no idea that it was in plain sight every day, all around us.
Masquerading as an angel of light.
Yes. And that was probably, waking up, that was one of the harder pills to swallow at that time, was like, whoa, it's everything. And so that's what you're saying, the Epstein. So you still have hope, though, that the list, it's going to come out. Like that's.
I think the demand for it is so high that it will, maybe in bits and pieces, kind of like the January 6th video footage.
Ah, good point.
You know, so we know it's out there, we know it exists, and we know that there's an effort to hide it.
Yeah.
And if anything, I mean, these people that have been doing this are operating from like a 5th grade maturity level. They're thinking, oh, if we steal the election, and then if we do a January 6th insurrection, no one's going to notice. Like, what? Like, yeah, we're just going to cover our tracks with an even bigger problem, and then just keep doubling down on the lie as it is, because every lie has to grow.
They do double down. That drives me crazy.
It does.
These people double down.
Well, they don't have an option. They either have to face what they've done, which they can't, because they're afraid of that judgment day, or they have to dig the hole even deeper, hoping that at the bottom of this pit, they're going to find some kind of reprieve. But that is a lie of the world, is that, you know, if you dig a little deeper, you're going to find some kind of purpose or whatever. But all you had to do is bend your knee and humble yourself before the Lord.
Wow.
And start to climb Jacob's ladder instead.
That is profound.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. I feel like I've had instances along this journey where I could say I felt that exactly.
Yeah.
Because you get so frustrated with them not, I think, aha, we got them, right?
Yeah.
Even when the list, quote unquote, comes out, my thought is, are we going to, have there been investigations? Because just because somebody flew on the plane doesn't mean that they were pedophiles on Epstein Island doing horrific things that you and I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
We need full investigations. I mean, the bank, I want to see the bank accounts. Who is giving him money? That's
Follow the money.
right? That's probably a better indication of who the clients are. Everyone goes, we want to see the client list. Well, yeah, but how do we prove the client list was accurate? The bank statements. Where are the bank statements?
Because receipts don't lie.
Right?
Receipts don't lie.
Receipts
well,
don't
the
lie.
other thing I was talking about last night, I thought I might have mentioned this with you before too, bringing it back to January 6th. On Sputnik Radio in DC, I forget who the host was, said that we have the receipts and the tickets purchased by Alexander Shuppe, which is a DNC operative, for the Ukrainian Azov Brigade to be present in January 6th, disguised as Trump supporters amongst the crowd. So tell me why Ukrainian special forces are side by side with me, and I don't even know it that day, but I'm the one that they say dressed for war and wanted to bring down the government. That's how crazy this whole thing gets. And it's in the book, One Question Remains, that portion there.
Which
there it is. Hey, check it out. That's it.
I'll get there. I tried last night. I'm going through your the
Yeah.
Where am I at? I'm on chapter 10.
In chapter 10?
Yes.
Yeah, show them the cover. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the book right there that's got a lot of questions
It's
in
so
it.
good. So good.
Yeah, but I will say this, that some of the questions we have an answer to, some people just don't want to give it yet. You know, like, why did Nancy Pelosi have to turn down 10,000 National Guard soldiers that Trump offered?
That's an obvious one to me, isn't it to you?
Well, you'd think it'd be obvious, but that means that she is actually guilty of treason, which we haven't really had to deal with in this nation since the Civil War. But as much as they tried saying that, you know, we've never had a problem like this since the Civil War, they're actually talking about themselves. So it's crazy how these things kind of coincide a little bit, and history repeats itself and whatnot. But what I can say is that the amount of people that needed January 6th to happen not only is large, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're on that Epstein list too.
Wow. For the cover up. Because you talked, I think they were clearly, when I say they, I guess I'm referring to the deep state, were targeting people like you. You mentioned on the podcast that you thought it was kind of weird. They were taking pictures of you because you were dressed in your Army Ranger uniform.
Right.
And so they were probably looking around and calculating, who can we pin this on? How can we spin this? And I love, because I remember the cars with the Chinese Americans that had escaped the CCP, and there was banners on the cars saying, you know, this is a Chinese Communist Party takeover. Don't fall for the lies. And you're saying you saw ones in the crowd.
And the CCP,
And the CCP. That's what they were. These little white cars all along the street. I took pictures of them that said the same thing.
Well, so something that you just said brings something to mind that I think is very necessary to even wrap your mind around. So, for example, a lot of the reasons why men and veterans dressed the way that we did was absolutely to show our patriotism. But on top of that, though, too, the two previous rallies that had taken place at January 6th, the Jericho March and the Million MAGA March, the Jericho Rally and the Million MAGA March, Antifa had been harassing, stabbing, firebombing, and attacking and jumping Trump supporters, whether they're old ladies on the way, whether they're old ladies on their way to their car or people that were willing to, you know, stand up and protect somebody. I think Noblebeard was stabbed or something like that. And so there were clashes between Proud Boys and Antifa prior to January 6th happening. So by the time January 6th, you know, is starting to gain traction in the public eye and people are talking about it on social media, we're also seeing these videos of our people getting attacked. So I also had it in my mind that, okay, if this goes down, I'm going to protect people. I've got the training, I've got the strength, and I have the desire to make sure that, you know, little old lady can finally get to her car and get home. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what every man should have. And that's what we're built to do.
What a real American hero is.
Well, thank you. But I will say this, though, it gets even deeper. And maybe this is the whole reason why. In 2020, we watched no repercussions for any of these riots that happened across the country.
Zero.
None. And we always say, oh, there's a two-tier justice system, and it's accurate. And we complained about the fact that Antifa and the Black Lives Matter people can get away with awful crimes. People can take over city blocks and have nothing done to them. So we acknowledge that. Let's zoom out a little bit further. What if literally everybody got away with what they did in 2020 as another layer to lure Trump supporters in, so that as they're participating in acts that they've watched happen all year long for the previous year, they feel like it's okay, and the bells and whistles that would normally be sounding off saying don't do this have been muted because they watched for the last year that this is actually acceptable behavior and everything is going to be okay and no repercussions will come down on you. What if that was the reason all along?
Gosh, I don't have words for that. I feel like we should just have a mic we can drop over and over for every time.
Well, it's in the book, but it's things that you got to think about. Like, everything happens for a reason. There's no accidents. But especially when it came to something as crazy as January 6th, things like that don't just materialize out of thin air. And in fact, the same year in 2021, the FBI had to concede that there was no grand plan between the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys.
Which was their initial narrative.
Of course, yeah. But they had to say, well, based off of our investigation, like the Robert Mueller report, no collusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Again, no collusion.
And there's still people I see on social media all the time that are still with Russia.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I think that's just a symptom of DTS. Or TDS.
TDS,
TDS,
yes.
That's what it is.
TDS is real.
It is, yeah. Well, I think that's a pride thing. I actually think that a lot of those folks that hate Trump actually hate their father. That's what it boils down to. Yeah, they have some kind of loathing against their father that they have had for a long time, and either they don't have a conversation opportunity to either reconcile or forgive their dad for whatever awful thing that they did to them, whether it was abuse or abandonment or both. And so a lot of these people that hate Trump see Trump as the ultimate father figure of the nation and take that rage and self-loathing and just put it on him. And that's why.
I never thought of it that way.
But it's true. I mean, so like, this is the reason why Jesus tells us to pray for our enemies, because, you know, had the circumstances been different, we could have been those people.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and then there could have been two folks in a church talking about us. You know, so that, you know, at any point in time, we could be outside of the house. You know, so that's why we have to bless those that persecute us and pray for enemies, because not only could we be them, depending on the scenario, but at any point in time, because of the way that we live our life, they could decide, you know what, I want what they have. But if we spent all of our time trashing them, you know, that would vindicate their rage against us and Trump.
That's a good point.
You know, that's why literally Jesus told Peter, dude, if I wanted this to stop, I could bring down 10,000 angels right now, but this must go down this way. I must be this lamb going to slaughter. Wow. You know, that's, I mean, and if you think about it, Trump gets called a dictator all the time, but every other dictator that's ever existed crushed everybody that opposed him, locked people up that ever spoke out against them. So he's not Stalin, he's not Hitler, he's not Mao, because anybody that ever opposed Trump should have been in jail, should have been murdered, should have been wiped out. Trump would have encouraged that, but he's not.
Nope.
So he's not a dictator. I think he's getting direction and I think protection from someone higher than any other dictator ever wished they could be.
Wow. Wow. Let's talk about once you got inside the Capitol.
Yeah, so I went in through a window. I did not get the tours that they were giving hours prior.
Now, you did not break the window that you went in, correct?
I did not break the window. I don't know who broke the window, but I did not break the window. There's no way that happened. Yeah. I didn't break the window. Someone broke the window.
Did you see who broke the window?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Got it? Copy that?
I plead the fifth. If Hillary Clinton can get away with doing that in Congress, I cannot recall, so can I. If Comey can do it, I can do it.
Fair enough.
It's a terrible excuse, but no. So once the window was broken,
Fair enough.
Yeah, well, yeah, once the window was broken, I was like, I've never been in here before. Let's check it out, you know? Yeah, that's all I wanted to do is just see what it looked like
I've
inside.
never been in here before.
Yeah, so I go in and my face is on fire because the CS gas that they were dumping on everybody that day, you know, and so there's a really grotesque photo of me just looking like I'm screaming, you know, or taking the biggest dump of my life, you know, it's just, this is terrible, you know. And then I jump in and I get in there and it's just like this office, but the weird thing was the office that I entered the window of was thrashed. Furniture was just destroyed. There was holes in the wall. Yeah, and like all this broken furniture was up against the door. I'm like, this is kind of confusing. This isn't what we do. And I'm starting to look around at these people. I'm like, who are these people that are in here? And where are my people? I'm all alone. I don't know any of these folks. There's people pissing in the corner in our nation's capital. You know, I'm like, what's going on here, man? You know, and then somebody walks up to me and hands me a couple batteries, like Duracell batteries, and goes, hey man, have this. I'm like, what's this for? He goes, it's when you punch a cop, you know, you can have more weight to your fist. It's called a fist pack. I'm like, what? And so I just set that thing down on one of the broken tables that's in there. You know, I'm like, what's going on here, man? You know.
Now, where in the Capitol was this?
If you look at the Lower West Terrace,
okay,
you know, the tunnel area where Roseanne Boylan was beaten to death, the window to the left, that I don't know who broke the window, but I went into, that right there is somebody's office. I don't know if it's like a congressman or senator or whatever, but it's someone's office.
Okay.
And a lot of the people that I would end up befriending were also in that office. And when the door that I saw last was barricaded by broken furniture, when I left, it was open and people kind of went in and out and stuff. But it was crazy to me that it was just getting destroyed, just demolished. And I'm thinking, like, this isn't why I came here. I don't know what's going on.
But it was it was an office, and you're not sure whose office
I don't know who it belonged to, no. They did bring it up in my court sessions where he entered this person's office as if I would have known.
Well, I don't remember anybody, there was no media coverage on that. Like, they were trying to obviously paint the narrative that it was insanity and there was chaos, but I don't remember them covering that office or what you're describing. Did they?
Well, I mean, there were different locations that I think gained more attention, like Big O putting his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. That kind of stole the show, you know, which is cool though, man. It's the people letting the
But he
people
wasn't
know.
doing anything
No, he wasn't
illegal.
doing anything wrong. That's the thing is that's our house. We pay for it every day.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I'm disgusted with now I have to pay my taxes this season. Come to find out that billions and trillions of dollars has been going all across the country for transgender operations on mice. Like, are you kidding me? And now I have to pay my taxes? You know, so it's just disgusting what we've been expected to tolerate in this country. But yeah, the little episode that I had inside the Capitol, I was kind of looking around, and there's a couple photos of me in there where my hat's turned backwards so I could get in the window. And then there was just these strange people inside that were trying to rev people up. And the one guy that handed me the fist pack or whatever, I'm thinking like, this is not good. And I
set it down.
Set it down. And
I'm
then
not
at that
going to
point
punch
in time,
a cop. Why would I need to punch a cop?
Right. Well, at that point in time, I literally heard the Holy Ghost in my chest, like grip my guts with his own fist and say, you need to leave now. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm leaving. And then I leave the window. I get back out to essentially where the Coliseum was because they were preparing for the inauguration, which I heard they were doing a little bit earlier than what they've all done normally. So I don't know if that's like a legitimate rumor or a fact. But if you think a Coliseum, if you look at the video footage, that's what it looks like, where thousands of people are cheering you on. Thousands of people are stomping their feet and screaming and waving flags. It was just, it's a trip to even go back in my head and recall what that felt like. I'm out there.
So you weren't inside very long, it sounds like.
No, I was in maybe a minute or two, looked around. I'm like, what's happening in here? And people were passing things outside the window. And so like I passed something out the window and I'm like, what's happening? You know, like what is going on here? Like, this isn't what I signed up for. And what are we accomplishing? You know? So I leave and then I'm out there and the sun's starting to get low. And obviously it was an overcast day. So like the lights kind of are going out. And this guy with silver hair comes out of the crowd and walks up to me and says, don't you think it's about time to leave? And I look at him and I'm like, I guess so. And then out of nowhere, the people that I showed up with all magically arrived side by side with me. And this one guy's like, don't you think it's time to leave, guys? And we're like, yeah, I guess so. So we start to leave, and I was literally about to get back into the fight at the Lower West Terrace Tunnel. I was in my head thinking like, man, I'm ready for round 2, you know, like, let's do this. Yeah, like there's people there that are getting abused and beaten and whatnot, and, you know. But this guy shows up, cuts through the crowd, singles me out and says, don't you think it's time to go? And he wouldn't let me out of his sight until we were gone from the Capitol grounds. Was literally looking over his shoulder to make sure that I was following him out. And then once we were away from the carnage of it all, he disappears.
What do you think that was?
I think it was an angel. I don't know.
That's what
I think I've met a couple of them in my life. But yeah, I think that was either an angel or someone who just had it on their heart to tell this idiot with curly hair, you got to leave, man, you know.
So now that I'm wrapping my brain around your story, you literally spent less than 5 minutes inside an office building, walked in, saw chaos, go, whoa, this isn't for me, and walked out.
Yeah.
And yet they nabbed you less than 6 months later, and you spent the remainder of the 3.5, almost 4 years in prison for walking into that office.
Well, I crawled in through the window that I didn't break.
For crawling in through the window you didn't break, looking around, realizing this is not my bag, and walking right out.
Yeah.
Wow. And they built up a whole case and a whole narrative around the fact that you were dangerous. And
well, you know, in the Lego set, that window really wasn't included, you know, so I guess I was lost.
You have
is what
such
really
a
happened,
good sense
you
of
know?
humor.
Because the Lego set wasn't built to scale, after I entered the window that wasn't on the blueprints,
that wasn't in the blueprint.
in the instruction manual that Lego designed, you know, yeah, I guess I didn't know what to do.
It's just, it's insane to me how they took good innocent people, how railroaded they took.
Well, you know what they wanted to do, though? They took the men that were willing to fight and got them out of the picture for what was going to happen next, which was Biden's imposter presidency. So that the men that they would get rid of and intimidate wouldn't stand up the way that they expected they would had January 6th not vacuum cleaned all the men out of the picture.
That makes so much sense.
But then on top of that, though, too, there's better jails they could have put us in. There's better prisons they could have put us in. There's better facilities that are not designed to warp a man's character and crack his sanity and crush him. But no, they put the January 6ers through the worst that they could offer without making it look blatantly obvious, so that we would become the monsters they said we were. And I was abundantly aware of that from the beginning, and that's why with my fingernails I had to hang on to my sanity and my integrity and my pride, because I knew that this is the game they're playing. They want us, whether it's going to take a year or 3, to finally be these deranged animals that they claim we were at January 6th, so that they can look back and say, what did we tell you guys? Here's this guy with his nuts hair, and he's got a beard now, and he's just psycho, and he's been in and out of the hole, and he's been in fights, and this is who Trump's going to pardon, this filth. But what they don't factor in is the life-saving power of Christ. And that was really the anomaly of this whole plan that they had. They wanted to break us all, and the one thing that we had that they couldn't take from us was our connection to the Almighty.
That is so sinister.
It is, yeah. Only the enemy of this nation and the enemy of our souls could concoct a plan like that.
And I think a lot of Christians that I know just can't, they don't want to accept that that level of evil exists.
And is hunting them.
How do we fix that?
You accept the mission. You know, before Jesus started doing miracles and, you know, going around and telling people to live better, he went through the wilderness first. Even the Son of Man had to go through the hero's journey, the underworld journey, the night sea journey, and come out the other side. Even the Son of God had to be evaluated, how much he wanted to save the world. People don't want to be evaluated because they know that they're going to come up short, so they would rather skip the test in the first place. They would rather stay in high school as a 50-year-old man and not take the SATs because they know they're going to fail, or they're afraid of failure, so they'd rather just stay in high school and look like a boy. That's what's happening. So what must be done is for men, especially men, women too, but mostly men, to accept the mission, accept the fact that we're going to fail, decide to be brave and say, you know what, failing is worth it because at least I'm climbing the mountain at all. So what I went through is a fate that is coming for everybody if we're not willing to be brave and make sure that I am the last political prisoner in America. This will happen again if this nation doesn't learn from what we went through.
And a lot of people, this is my other frustration, now that Trump is back in office, a lot of people that were on the journey, the hero's journey, they were on the front lines for whatever reason, and I'm not judging them. It got hard, they got tired, they had to take a break.
Yeah.
But a lot of them now are like, he's back in, it's good, we're all good.
No.
And it couldn't be that could not be further from the truth.
We have been given a second chance that we don't deserve.
Oh man, I've been calling it a reprieve. Yes.
It is, yeah, it's a nice opportunity to catch your second wind, but we're always one generation away from losing this republic. But on top of that, though, too, we're one choice away from losing our integrity. You know, and so I think that's something that a lot of these individuals would rather participate in exchange for that initial sting of discomfort. They would rather hide behind a TV screen or go and drown their sorrows at a bar or whatever.
Yep.
Worshiping false gods, because if you think a false god is supposed to be on some kind of pedestal in some kind of temple like it was in antiquity, you're wrong. It looks like the black mirror on everybody's wall. It looks like that silver can in your hand. It looks like that four-wheeled thing in your garage. Those are false gods that you worship. Time is how you show worship. Wherever you spend your time, that is how you show worship. And the worship that God wants is obedience. It's not singing as loud as you can and making a clown out of yourself in the service. That doesn't impress God. What impresses God is obedience. And what has He commanded us to do? To be strong and courageous. So if you're strong and courageous, that is worship. And if you want to save this country, worshiping God is based on your willingness to say, this is going to hurt. I recognize this, but it's worth it. That's why the story of Jesus in the garden is so crucial, because he verbalizes to his dad, this is going to hurt bad, like really bad, but your will be done.
Yes, He did.
And if we can have that same kind of conversation with the same Father that Jesus was talking to, we never would have been here. I never would have been locked up if more men were willing to be brave like they should have been.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm going on we're putting together an events tour in Pennsylvania for election integrity, specifically we're calling it Audit the Vote Phase 2, because again, we've been given a reprieve.
We have.
But I also...
Brief as it is.
Yes, brief. And I mean, just this week, our Governor, Josh Shapiro, is migrating our electronic voting system, called the Shore system, to a different platform called Civics. And touting it, of course, is it's going to modernize elections, it's going to make everything much simpler and smoother and easier and accurate. And in fact, it's going to just take us further down the degradation hole of no transparency, no trust, centralized power. So Audit the Vote's on a mission to work at the grassroots level to decentralize everything, to get it back in the control of the county officials and the people. Let's get rid of any electronics that can be hacked, and there's any
What's wrong
question.
with paper?
So there's no question, because it's really all about the battle that we tried to win the first time around was convincing people that the votes were flipped, that things were changed. And unfortunately, the machine companies wouldn't give us access to that information to either confirm it or deny it. There was no, so we're left with this big question bubble. But what we can prove and what we're going to do moving forward is that there's no transparency when you're using this electronic machine.
Without a doubt.
There's no way to know that when I scan my ballot in, that the vote is actually counted the way I wrote it down on the piece of paper.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big faux pas with the campaign that Mike Lindell waged to try to confirm that the election was stolen. He blamed it all on the machines when it's actually the programming that did this.
Yes.
Dell computers could do this stuff. So when you point the finger at the machine and you use legal jargon in the wrong direction, you actually kind of ruin the credibility of the whole the election was stolen thing, because you're not accurate with your words. It's the programming.
Yep.
And there's a couple individuals out there right now that have the evidence to say that no, it was the program that stole this stuff. That's the reason why, you know, the liberals can say, oh, well, see, Mike Lindell just made a jerk out of himself on national television. He didn't prove anything. Ha, ha, ha. You know, but I like the way that J.D. Vance put it, is that these guys on the mainstream media will take a conspiracy theory that isn't as strong. They'll debunk that and then use that as a totem pole to try to lambast the entire narrative of stealing an election, when there's various ways that the election was stolen, just like we've discussed. Why are properties not there supposedly on your voter registration? Why are people long dead that are voting? You know, and these are things that we included in the book. That's the craziest thing about this, is I was referencing your work without even knowing your name.
Isn't that crazy?
And your work is in the book you're holding.
That is insane.
Well, that's how you know your work matters. You were trying to save the republic single-handedly, and that's awesome. You should be proud of that.
Not single-handedly. We had I would say I started with two women at the time. There were three of us, all very similar. No political background whatsoever. Woke up in 2020 and said, we got to do something. They stole the election. And the three of us wrote a petition and started getting signatures. Could we gather support? And it really, when I look back at the time, it felt like we were pulling teeth, that it should have happened faster. But when I look back, it was a short period of time that all of a sudden, man, people were drawn to the movement like moths to a flame. And it just like took off, so much so that by the summertime, they were trashing us in the mainstream media. And again, I didn't know. So when you got arrested and took away, our narrative of they really did steal it was starting to gain traction.
Yes.
And we were starting to knock doors and find the real evidence that says something went wrong.
Because if I was wrong, I never would have been locked up.
Ah.
The things that I went through prove that I was right.
Amen. And we were, what I didn't know is that the whole time you guys were locked up, we were getting the receipts. We were building the narrative of the truth that something went horribly awry and it needs fixed. So back to the whole reason I started to tell you that is because our next series of events, which you mentioned you're going to be in Pennsylvania. If it works out, I would love to have you at one of them. We're calling the Republic If You Can Keep It Tour.
Excellent.
A path to honest elections.
Yeah.
What is the path? Because it's not going to be like I thought it was when I first wrote the petition. It's not going to be just, boom, we're going to present all this evidence to our state reps and they're going to fix it. And then when we realized that wasn't going to happen, we went local. Well, we're going to present everything to the county commissioners and they're going to fix it. Well, guess what? It's up to us.
I think, ultimately, you'd have to reference history yet again. And we talk about in the book, there's two moments in time that are extraordinary where an election was conducted for the president, paper ballots,
conducted
in the middle of the Civil War, where you might get shot on your way to the ballot box and people are still willing to vote and get out of their house and do it. It wasn't an electronic thing. It was no, it's my pride and joy to be represented in this constitutional republic. I'm going to have pride as I walk, perhaps through enemy territory, in order to cast my ballot. But then on top of that too, in the middle of World War I and the Spanish flu was going around the planet and killing way more people than the coronavirus ever did, people, they might have thrown a t-shirt around their head, but they went down and physically voted and put something in the mail that was tangible. And so we can take them down at history lane and then ask these folks, are we as brave as our ancestors were? Because that's really all it boils down to. The only reason why you need convenience is because of cowardice. That's it, especially when it comes to following the law and trying to keep this republic. It takes strength and determination and sacrifice to keep this country as free as it should be. But no one's willing to pay that anymore, and we're reaping the consequences of it. And so there's an old French phrase that essentially says that people get the government that they deserve.
It's true.
And thank God we have federalism in this country, so, one state can be an experimental procedure for a policy or a way of life, and we can watch that either succeed or fail and not have to tank the entire nation because of it.
Yep.
And so if they're going to keep stealing elections in, let's say Pennsylvania, well, why can't people leave this place?
Yeah.
Like they're leaving California. As sad as it is to say, we deserve better from our leaders, but ultimately our leaders deserve better from us, the people. So I'm right there with you. However I can help and advocate for people to be brave, I will.
Yeah.
You're gonna ruffle some feathers, but it's the only fight worth having.
Well, and I think just like what happened to both of us, I think God is tapping who He wants, His players on the shoulder and saying, "This is a new path for you." Because what I thought I was going to spend my adult life doing is not panning out the way I thought it would. And that's okay. It's just, I can see a clear point in the road where the Lord shifted what I thought I was called to do and said, nope, we're going to pivot and you're going to go this direction.
There's a powerful moment in the movie Braveheart where William Wallace says to his friends when he knows he's going into a trap, he says, you know, I want a family. I've asked God for these things. But then later on, he also says that, you know, every man dies, but not every man really lives. And so sometimes what we want or what we think we want in life is not what God had intended. What are we willing to trade for something that we think we want for ultimately the demise of everybody else around us? Am I going to hide behind the fact that, oh, I want a wife and kids, and then use them to conceal my own cowardice behind? That's wicked, because that's not even a good environment for a child to be raised in, let alone for a loving relationship between a husband and a wife. But there's a really good line in the song I Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd that, and I think it's in the book, but I've said it a lot, where it says, did you exchange a walk-on part in the war for a lead role in a cage?
Wow.
And that's exactly what's happening. You and I are playing a very small part in an enormous tapestry that's way bigger than just America. Humans, since day one, have been struggling to obtain freedom and what that really feels like, not just from government, but also from sin. And we had it. We had it for a good 200 years in America, where people figured it out and we were able to enjoy it. But our part to play is just a walk-on part in a conflict that'll never die until Jesus comes back. But did people that might listen to this video, or people that are going to listen to people who have listened to this video, exchange their God-given right and responsibility to pick up their cross? Did they exchange all that for a lead role in a cage?
Wow.
Where you're not going anywhere, but you're the star of the show.
Crazy. You just described the pivot that my life took.
Yeah.
Really and truly.
Well, that's the point of the hero's journey. And we're all supposed to go on it. Imagine a world where we all did, you know. But the fact remains, a lot of people have a lot of excuses for why they didn't do that thing. But their inaction is actually their own nightmare. They're afraid of what they should have done more than the boogeyman. So
profound. You need a book of like quotes and sayings and like.
Maybe, yeah.
My God.
I'm not the source though. God is. I mean, truly.
Amen.
And while I was locked up, I actually prayed for God to fold my brain in on itself more so that I could retain more information. Like I would say things like that. It might have worked. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm I don't think I'm the sharpest tool in the shed, but.
I would disagree.
Thanks. Well, I know that, you know, when the Bible says, ask and you shall receive, in my Father's name, you know, I mean, I want to do these things because I recognize where my help comes from, and I'm extremely motivated to make sure that the next one in line does too. And if I fail, it's to the detriment of that one that I haven't met yet. If I fail, if I let my guard down, if I fall asleep at the wheel, I'm not just screwing myself over or the woman that I love over. I'm screwing over the kid that I had the honor to pray with while I was a teacher at Shaler. That's who I'm screwing over. If I don't do my job.
Wow. How do we wind this down? You talked about, let's shift gears a little bit. And if you have anything else that you want to share, feel free to do it before we wind it down. But sure. I know we talked about, those of us that took the hero's journey have been down a ridiculous amount of rabbit holes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And have uncovered stuff about our own history. We've been through this, it's a psychological war really, where you start to wonder, what can I trust? What do I believe? And it's brought you and I both probably back to really the Word of God. There's one you can trust, and that's pretty much it. But we're taught all different things about history. And, you know, America... you and I both love our country. We're fighting for the preservation of the Republic, and me specifically, so that the word can continue to be preached and souls can be saved. Isn't that the whole point of it?
Yeah.
And so we're very proud that that's what we're fighting for and that's where we come from. But throughout our history, not just people use the Civil War as the slavery as the stain on America. There's been multiple stains on America.
Sure.
And we
like
talked
stealing
about
an election.
like stealing an election.
Or the lobster trap of January 6th.
Yes. And there's
locking me up. Yeah, that's a big ass stain.
Such a good sense of humor. Oh my gosh. But we start to wonder these things like World War I and World War II, and you find out the endless wars. It's pretty obvious. World War II we think was a good turning point. In some ways I'm sure it was, but also that's started this trail of endless wars to where we find ourselves now. Movies like Iron Man showing you that's probably actually happening, where we're funding both sides of it.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but you had an interesting perspective when I asked you off camera about this, about how do we look at our country and love it, despite the stains. So tell me about that.
Sure. I'll explain that, and then I'll explain a little bit of story that I actually had that kind of made me reevaluate things. So I recognized while I was in prison that I had every reason to hate my country. For what it's worth, on the surface, I served my country honorably as a ranger. Wanted to become a high school history teacher, and you spit in my eye and you send me to prison and call me a terrorist and insurrectionist and all these things. And we already talked about that whole Twilight Zone thing that I had. But then I started to realize that the people didn't do this to me. And the Rocky Mountains and Lake Tahoe and, the forests and the fields, they didn't do that to me. So I started to divide in my mind the way that a man can love his country into three categories. You can love your nation's people, you can love your nation's land, and you can love your nation's government. Well, I think we have the greatest people in the nation. And I know I kind of called them out there for a little bit, and I recognize that, but at the end of the day, there's no one on the planet that's going to work harder, sacrifice more, believe harder, endure longer than the American.
I agree.
And that's why everybody from around the planet wants to come here, is because they too want to catch that fever of, man, I want to go to the moon. I want to be a millionaire. I want to know what it's like to go to college. We do that here all day long. Our nation's land is beautiful, and obviously, like you're talking about some stains on our history. Some of the contracts that we had with the Native American tribes, we ripped in half, and some of the land that, wasn't initially ours, we might have fought for and maybe stolen and stuff. And so, like, I get that, and that's a tragic thing. I wasn't there for that, though.
Right, me neither.
Yeah, neither were you. But the one person that's 365 years old that's getting Social Security checks from our nation's government, they might have been there, right? Yeah, that's a thing. But what I'm trying to say is that our land is extraordinary. We bought a lot of it. The Louisiana Purchase was enormous. If you do the history, that's a fantastic thing that Napoleon was willing to sell us because he had war debt, and our third president was like, yeah, we'll take it. Thomas Jefferson's like, sure, we'll check it out. And then Lewis and Clark leave from Pittsburgh down the Ohio River to, investigate this territory that we just bought. Yeah, I'm telling you, Pittsburgh's awesome. There's so many cool things that happen. But anyways, we're getting off track. Nation's people, nation's land. I'm very, very unimpressed with my government. But that's only one category. There's two other categories that I can still adore and find pride in. And so when it comes to those three categories, even though we've been screwed over time and time again by our nation's government, we still have the greatest people and the greatest land. And all three are worth fighting for, but we still got two, and that's enough. In addition to what you said earlier, I wanted to tell a story from when I went to Northern Neck, which is actually where I'm heading. The minute this interview's over, I'm going down to Virginia because I got a bone to pick with that jail that I was in for 13 months.
Good for you.
Word had spread that I was a history teacher. And a buddy of mine named James Reagan walks up to me and he says, so what's that Northern history like? And I thought to myself, Northern history? What does that mean? There's 4 different types of history in America alone. There's the North's history from the Civil War, what they teach you about what happened in the Civil War. Then there's the South's version of what the Civil War was and what they teach and what's in their textbooks. Because the Reconstruction era tried to wipe out the South. Tennessee, Virginia, all these places were burned to the ground by the North.
Right.
These are things that I didn't even know until I went down there and broke bread with these people, and they told me, oh yeah, you like Abraham Lincoln up there? We don't. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't even wrap my mind around that. That's crazy.
Right.
So that was nuts. Then we have the Native Americans' history of America, where all they've ever done has been screwed over by Uncle Sam, time and time again. And they're willing to go fight for him in World War I and World War II. How crazy is that? And then you have the African American history of America. So, yeah, a lot of them might have come from slaves. A lot of them didn't. But it's strange to see not just that there's a divide between these 4 different types of history that are always kind of competing for which is the real history.
Right.
You know.
Right.
You know, it blew my mind to find out that Cherokee Indians owned African slaves at one point in time in our nation's history, and I've seen those photos, so that was pretty mind-blowing. So it's crazy because there's a lot of gray area between those 4 different quadrants.
I'll say.
But I think the thread between them all, which is the thread between all of history, is the fact that you cannot deny the legitimacy of a man's integrity. You know, the fruits of the Spirit cut through everything, just like the Holy Word does. It cuts through flesh and arguments, and whether or not someone told the truth or a lie, or whether or not someone was willing to sacrifice, participate in a last stand, give their life so that someone else could live. Those elements are throughout all 4 of those history. Those elements are throughout the entire history of the human condition here on earth. And so regardless of what history you're going to pay attention to, you can keep your eyes peeled for that one moment where someone said, I'm going to die so you can live. And regardless of whose team that's on, that's worth talking about.
That is, I never thought of it. That's a really good way to categorize history. And which one is right and which one is wrong?
It depends on who was willing to sacrifice.
Wow. So good. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap things up. What do you think?
Well, thank you for your time. This is a beautiful place. I mean, this church that we're in, this community that I can't wait to watch develop here is fantastic. And I'm very proud of what you do at Audit the Vote.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. We're kindred spirits. We'll stay connected.
I know it. I can't wait. The best is yet to come.
The best is yet to come.
Always.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
That's purpose.
Awesome. Tell people how they can support your efforts and follow you.
Sure. So I got a really cool website. It's called www.akalegoman.com with 2 G's. There's a contact us option on there, so we can stay in touch. Buy a book. One question remains. Yeah, I might see a couple pennies from that, but ultimately I want people to know the truth. I want people to educate themselves on how amazing this country is and how even more amazing our God is, and that if we're not willing to give up on this country, God's not willing to give up on us. Like I said, Project Carpe Diem is in the works, so we'll be in touch about how that can happen here soon and start making some waves. But yeah, don't be a stranger and know that the next generation will keep this republic if they have a good example to follow. So that's on us.
I would have never, it's been quite a transformation for you. I would have never guessed you even drank up until as recently as you said. You just seem so well
You don't drink a lot in prison.
I was gonna
You know, so that's, I mean, you can. People make hooch all the time, but I abstain from that.
Yep.
Obviously, the guards smuggling drugs, everywhere.
Obviously, like that.